good to see you again.
Good to see you again.
Yeah, absolutely. And thanks again for another incredible keynote here at Digital Edge, which is wonderful. So you were talking really on why the IT department model should change. And one of the key points around there was your definition of innovation. So please go ahead.
Yeah, so first of all, I've got to acknowledge it's not my definition of innovation. I did steal it off someone, and I recently tried to find out who I stole it off, but I searched the internet and I couldn't find someone else saying it the same way. Okay. But the simple definition, or the working definition I use, is innovation is just change that creates value.
There we go.
Yeah,
simple as that.
It is that simple, and I think though when you kind of embrace it like that, as that simple definition, it actually gives you some really good sense of direction. Because ultimately then, is that we all need to be innovative. Because if we're not being innovative, we're not creating value, we're not creating change, and unless we're in an environment where everybody, like all our competitors, all our customers, are comfortable with the status quo, unless everybody doesn't want it to change, then we must innovate. It's almost an imperative for survival.
Yeah. So just on that status quo journey to innovation, can you elaborate a little bit more on that?
Yeah, so there's a lot of research that's been done around organisations and how they can become more innovative. And if you kind of break it down to its simplest components, there's two core parts of it. The first part of that is we need to provide an environment that supports people and enables them to be innovative. So that environment is made up of things like our policies, our procedures, our org structure, our culture. Like, do we encourage people to change and take risks and potentially fail? Or do we try and protect them and stop them from doing that? So we can either have an enabling environment or one that's kind of restrictive. The second part of it is our people. So do we have people who are capable and who are willing to take advantage of that opportunity, or people who feel like they lack the skills and the knowledge they need and are more comfortable with the status quo? So people who are kind of low on that capability scale are quite comfortable if things don't change, because that's their safe space. But ultimately that's not going to take us towards where we need to go. It's not going to lead us towards that innovative space. And so I think what that kind of leads us to is that obviously we need both. Like, we need capable people and we need an enabling environment. But there's a real risk that we don't get both. And in each case, we kind of end up with a real challenge. And I think this challenge is probably one of the biggest challenges organisations face when it comes to digital and technology. So the first of those is that we can have people who are more capable than the environment enables. So it used to be that, IT skill and IT knowledge was hard to come by, and now, like, everybody's got it. Like, everybody walks around with 3 computers. Everybody knows how to use apps. Everybody's in charge of their own security on their home network and sets up their devices. So we have these capable people, and yet often we ask them to operate in an environment that doesn't enable them. And when that happens, these people become frustrated. And the frustration manifests in a certain type of subversive behaviour. And we talk about organisations about the concept of shadow IT. So shadow IT is when people do the things that they haven't got permission to do. And that's the subversive behaviour of frustrated people. Weirdly, they're doing it because they just want to be effective in their job. They're not trying to be malicious, they're just trying to do their job better. But that frustration is very real for them. And ultimately, it's not just that they do things they're not asked to do and create issues around security for our IT departments, it's ultimately that they leave. So the research shows is that people who feel that they aren't given the technology to do their job properly are 3 times more likely to leave the organisation. So as we go through this challenge from the status quo to innovation, we've got those frustrated people, and then we also have their opposite. And the opposite of that is that we also have people who feel that the things are changing too fast, that the environment is pushing them to change more than they're comfortable with. And those people actually feel overwhelmed. And just like you have with the frustrated people, and they have a set of subversive behaviour around doing things that they're not asked to, the overwhelmed people have a different subversive behaviour, and that behaviour is, I won't do the things you've told me. So I'll make all the right noises when you're looking at me, I'll go to your training program that you made me go to, but as soon as your back is turned, I'll go back to the same old ways of doing things. Yeah. And weirdly, the effort that those people often put into that avoidance is actually much greater than it would have taken to learn to use the technology in the first place. But I think what that to me is a reflection of how significant this challenge is. So we used to think that the challenges around, especially technology innovation, were technical, that the issues were around how do we get the technology to work. But I think now the technology is changing faster than a lot of people are comfortable with. and trying to balance the dual needs of both the frustrated people and the overwhelmed people, I think is probably the biggest problem that organisations face in terms of that innovation agenda.
Yeah, and there's no real solution, like snapshot solution that can actually solve this, right? This is a continual flux of an equilibrium, right? So you've got this wave that's going through and your main aim is to get out to that flat equilibrium state. So how does a company, an organisation really go about, one, establishing that this is an issue within their business, and then secondly, what are the first steps to actually doing something about it?
Yeah, so I think there are things we can do. And I think probably the biggest thing is to understand is that even though it feels like these two challenges, the frustrated people and the overwhelmed people, are incompatible, like how do we change fast enough and slow enough at the same time? It's actually, when you look at the problem more closely, that's actually not what we're dealing with. It's not that the overwhelmed people don't like change. You'd probably find is that those people are dealing with changes in their life all the time. It's particular types of change that people struggle with. The type of change that we struggle with most is big, irregular change. So weirdly, I think especially within Western cultures, that's what we gravitate towards. We gravitate towards these name-making, game-changing, future-proofing type changes, like these big digital transformations. But those types of transformations are the hardest for individuals to manage, the hardest for them to get their heads around, the hardest for them to understand, the most disruptive and disturbing, the ones that generate the most fear and the most pushback. So instead of pursuing those types of changes, or maybe to balance out some of those bigger changes if we do need to make them, what if we could also have an environment that allowed for lots of little changes, that took almost more of a continuous improvement approach to how we use technology, as opposed to just the big bang approach. And I think in those continuous improvement approaches, there's two things that we get. One is obviously the opportunity to improve, and we'd expect that through that improvement that we drive efficiency, improve competitiveness, improve profitability. But I think secondary to that is that each one of those little projects or improvements is actually a chance for people to learn. And it's almost like these continuous improvement projects are almost like micro-learning opportunities. And so if we can break down and focus more on the lots of little changes and lots of little improvements, I think we can actually satisfy both the people who feel overwhelmed, but also potentially the people who feel frustrated, because they're seeing change. They have avenues for taking their own frustrations and getting them acted on. So I think that still is a significant shift for organisations to make, but we are seeing it in things like, we talk about agile as a philosophy, and within that we see within obviously software development things like Scrum. Like these are processes that have been developed because they acknowledge that the old big bang approach to developing software didn't work. So how do we take incremental slices and do it that way? So it's almost like saying, well, let's just take that same philosophy and apply it to how we deliver IT internally in our organisation. So I think there are solutions, but it is going to take a whole organisation approach, I think, and commitment to solving them.
It's a microservices approach to development, right? It's not far away from that in that way, that rather than looking at the large outcome, you break it down into the individual services that make up that part, right?
Completely. But then I think as part of that, there has to be a realignment of where IT sits in the organisation. If they don't sit near me, how can I engage with them to help them solve these problems or fix these or implement these opportunities that I've identified? And secondly, if they don't sit near me, how could they possibly know what I'm dealing with? So I think there's a real challenge in a lot of organisations where there's actually a separation that we've created between the people who have the problems and the people who have solutions. So we have IT people with solutions, but we create geographical diversity, so a geographical gap, we put them on a different floor on a different building. We also create language barriers, so people in operations speak their language and people in IT speak their language. I think there's even sometimes a respect gap. So my experience in working in large organisations is that people who work in shared services, so it's not just IT, but includes things like HR, procurement, there's often a lack of respect for those roles with people who have operational roles. It's almost like you're a necessary evil for the business as opposed to an opportunity for me to tap into or a knowledge base for me to tap into. And again, these all fit together, like the separation, the language creates in some ways that reputation gap as well. And I think we need to find ways of closing that. And I think one of the ways of doing that is co-locating people together.
Yeah, absolutely. And look, it's got to come down from the top as well. If we're all talking about being technology-led companies and having the ability to deliver whatever services we need to through technology, then surely the IT department and the way that they deliver that to the business to enable that then elevates them within the organization to be the main driver of that.
Completely, yeah. And I think a lot of the concepts I talk about are based on ideas like lean, which is very much about empowering people to make the change that they want to see. I'm a big believer in this idea of how do we tap into those frustrated people and turn them almost into citizen experts. So how do we actually give them the tools, the permission, and even some resourcing to actually be leaders of change. Now, they may not do it solo. They might be about how do I engage with someone within the IT department to provide some specialist technology knowledge or some ideas around what types of solutions might already exist out there. But I can actually take an active role in identifying a problem, identifying the business case for its implementation, looking at different solutions, choosing one and implementing it. And how if I could do that, what if I could short circuit a process that at the moment might take months or potentially even years and do it in weeks?
Yeah.
I think that would be a really great outcome.